Hi, I'm Linda Braswell, and I would like to discuss medical coding with you today. Have you ever felt that everything about you could be reduced to a series of numbers? This is especially true of your health care. Each time you seek healthcare services and an insurance claim is filed, a series of numbers are submitted on your behalf. How do we choose diagnosis codes? Well, the ICD-9-CM book, which stands for the International Classification of Diseases, is the coding Bible. Basically, you can look up any diagnosis code in this book. In your handouts, I've given you some excerpts from the pages of the manual. To begin with, I have given you the table of contents. I'm especially interested in showing you Part 2 and Part 3. Part 2 is a section of the book where you can look up any diagnosis alphabetically. Part 3 is where you can look up a diagnosis numerically. If you'll notice on the table of contents under Part 3, it's broken down into organ systems. The numbers in parentheses after each organ system tells you what root code or codes are in those sections. A diagnosis code can be 3 digits, but much more often is 4 or 5 digits. If there are 4 or 5 digits, there will always be a decimal between the third and fourth digit. On the next page of the handout is an excerpt from the alphabetic listing, so you can see how you can look things up alphabetically, and then it'll give you the tabular number. It's always a good idea, once you look up a diagnosis code alphabetically, to go ahead and look up the tabular number, because if you'll notice the bolded circles down at the bottom, it tells you that the bolded circle means that there are additional digits required for that diagnosis. Also, if you'll look at the box on the left, you'll see numbers 0 through 3 that can be used as a 5th digit. So there are a series of codes following this box that require a 5th digit, and this is where you choose that 5th digit. It's much easier to figure out this information going to the tabular list. So in general, you may look the diagnosis up alphabetically because it's much faster, but you want to verify in the tabular list to make sure you're getting the best code. The next 2 pages are samples of alphanumeric codes. The V codes are incidental status codes. They just further define something about the patient. E codes are external causes codes. If there is an accident, injury, or poisoning, codes are pulled from here to help with statistical data. When do we use diagnosis coding? Pretty much anytime you access healthcare, but what I'm going to discuss today is in the physician office setting. Generally, in the physician office setting, you give a medical, social, surgical history about yourself. Then you see the physician. The physician is going to document information about you in the SOAP note format. When I say SOAP, I literally mean S-O-A-P. S stands for subjective. This is what you are saying is the reason for your visit. O stands for objective. This is what the physician will document as far as his findings. A is the assessment, which is your diagnosis, and P is the plan of care. During your office visit, some additional services may be required other than the office visit. In that situation, we need to take into mind medical necessity. There's got to be a diagnosis justifying the additional service. Insurance companies will not pay for services that they do not deem medically necessary. So once we have the SOAP note format and it's time to code, basically the coder is going to look at 3 sections of the note: the history, the subjective, and the assessment. There are usually 3 scenarios in which we need to code an office visit. It could be a new patient or an established patient with a new condition. It could be an established patient following up a stated condition, or it could be a wellness exam. In the situation where it's a new patient or a new condition, we're always going to use the patient's symptoms as the primary diagnosis. Whatever the physician diagnoses can be a secondary diagnosis. V-codes regarding the status can be added, and an E-code if there's an injury or accident or poisoning. But the symptoms are going to be your primary diagnosis. In the situation where it's an established patient seeking care for a stated condition, the stated condition will be the primary diagnosis. There can be additional complaints, there can be additional findings by the physician, and it's perfectly appropriate to include those on the claim form, but the primary diagnosis should be the stated condition. And then for a wellness exam, there's going to be a wellness code as the primary diagnosis. There may be additional findings that are also documented, but the primary diagnosis should be the wellness code. So in summary, what we want to do when we're doing diagnosis coding is we want to carefully review the services that were provided. We want to make sure that we choose from the appropriate section depending on the reason for the visit. If there are additional services, we want to make sure that we are coding a diagnosis that justifies that additional service. If there was any type of accident or external cause, we want to make sure that we include that also. When you seek care, generally at the end of the visit, you're handed something that has a synopsis of the visit. You may want to start paying attention to what those codes are. If inaccurate information gets on file, it's very difficult to get that changed. And those things can come to haunt you if you are applying for life insurance or disability, those type of things. In the words of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, there is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact. Thank you.